January 12th, 1943, Monday, 8 o'clock in the morning. The Oakmont Estate for the elderly sits 3 miles outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on a hillside overlooking the Allegheny River. A young woman in a crisp white nurse's uniform climbs the front steps. Vera Holloway, 24 years old, freshly graduated from the Western Pennsylvania Hospital School of Nursing. Her first day on the job. She doesn't know that in 6 months she'll become a witness in a case involving 11 murders. Doesn't know that she'll steal documents from the director's office and run through Pittsburgh's winter streets in the middle of the night, coatless, in 15-degree weather. Doesn't know that this model facility, lauded by the Pennsylvania Department of Welfare, praised in the Pittsburgh press, is actually a death factory where elderly residents are killed for their property. She pushes through the heavy oak doors and the smell hits her. Disinfectant, boiled cabbage, something else underneath. Sweet, stale, institutional. The director, Mr. Clarence Whitmore, meets her in his wood-paneled office. A man of 42, dressed in a tailored suit despite wartime fabric rationing, with a warm smile and the confident bearing of a successful businessman. He shows her around the facility. 3 floors, 52 beds, exemplary conditions by wartime standards. Steam heat functioning properly. Meals 3 times daily despite rationing restrictions. Staff courteous and experienced. On the walls hang citations from the Department of Welfare, thank you letters from the mayor's office, a framed photograph of Whitmore shaking hands with a Pennsylvania congressman. Whitmore speaks in measured, almost paternal tones. This is where dignified citizens spend their final years, veterans of the Great War, retired steelworkers, schoolteachers, shopkeepers. People who built this city, who deserve comfort and respect. Vera listens, nods. Everything looks proper. Everything feels safe. The first week passes routinely. Vera administers medications, changes bedding, takes blood pressures, helps residents to the dining hall. The elderly are quiet, grateful, some barely leaving their rooms. She learns faces and names. Mrs. Edith Morrow in room 7, former Latin teacher at Shenley High School, taught for 41 years, husband killed in a mill accident in 1927, no children. 83 years old, slight as a bird with alert gray eyes. Mr. Harold Dunleavy in room 14, mechanical engineer, worked for Westinghouse for 37 years designing electrical systems for Navy destroyers. Wife dead from influenza in 1938. Son supposedly stationed somewhere in the Pacific. 76 years old, heavy-set with a weak heart and trembling hands. Dr. Agnes Renwick in room 21, surgeon. Spent 4 decades at Allegheny General Hospital. Daughter married and moved to Chicago. Calls perhaps once a month. 79 years old, thin but still sharp, with steady surgeon's hands despite arthritis. Lonely people, Vera realizes quickly. This is where you end up when there's nowhere else to go. When family forgets. When an empty house becomes unbearable. Vera talks with them, listens to their stories. Mrs. Morrow recounts teaching Caesar and Virgil to generations of Pittsburgh children, how Latin discipline builds character. Mr. Dunleavy describes the precision required from military contracts, the pride of contributing to the war effort even in peacetime. Dr. Renwick speaks of operations performed, lives saved, grateful patients who sent Christmas cards for years afterward. Ordinary people, ordinary American lives. At the end of the 2nd week, Mrs. Edith Morrow dies. Saturday morning, January 25th. Vera enters room 7 and finds her motionless, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She calls for the attending physician. Dr. Burton Creighton arrives, 59 years old, employed at Oakmont for 21 years. He examines the body, checks for a pulse that isn't there, shakes his head. Pronounces death. Cause? Acute cardiac arrest. Mrs. Morrow was 83, had hypertension. This is normal. Expected. Vera feels sad but not surprised. In nursing homes, people die. It's natural. It's the job. Dr. Creighton completes the death certificate, stamps it, leaves. Vera stays with the body until the undertaker arrives. She closes Mrs. Morrow's eyes, folds her hands across her chest, whispers goodbye. 2 days later, Monday, Vera accidentally overhears a conversation. She's walking past the administrator's office, the door slightly ajar. Inside, voices. One belongs to Whitmore, the other to the facility administrator, Mr. Eugene Hastings, a man of about 50 with the florid complexion of a heavy drinker. Vera stops. Not deliberately eavesdropping, she simply freezes because she hears a familiar name, but they're not discussing her. Whitmore is speaking quietly but distinctly. __quote _0 __. Hastings mumbles something indistinct, hoarse. Whitmore continues, quote, 1. Vera stands frozen, pressed against the hallway wall, not breathing. Blood pounds in her ears. Property. Will. Quote 2. Quote 3. What does this mean? She hears chairs scraping, someone standing up. Vera moves quickly, pretends to be walking past on routine business. Hastings emerges from the office, sees her, nods. She nods back, continues down the hall. Her heart hammers. That evening, she returns to the conversation, sits in the nurse's station pretending to update patient charts, actually thinking. The Morrow woman completed the paperwork. Completed what? A will? In whose favor? The state? Or Whitmore personally? Dunleavy's next on the list. A list of what? A death list? Vera checks Mrs. Morrow's medical file, flips through pages. The entries appear routine. Blood pressure 142/88, pulse 70, mild edema in ankles, standard prescriptions. Nothing unusual. But the final entry, made 3 days before death, notes __quote _6 stable. And 3 days later, acute cardiac arrest. It happens, certainly. At 83, anything can happen. But Whitmore's words won't leave her mind. Vera begins observing. Carefully, quietly, as nursing school taught her. Observe, document, draw no premature conclusions. She notices that Whitmore frequently visits rooms of residents without family, brings them tea in china cups, sits beside their beds, talks softly, confidentially, smiles. Sometimes asks nurses to step out, supposedly to allow residents to complain privately about staff, ensuring quality care. Thoughtful for a good administrator. In early February, Vera sees Whitmore leaving Mr. Dunleavy's room carrying a leather folder. Harold Dunleavy sits on his bed afterward, looking confused, staring out the window. Vera enters, asks, "Mr. Dunleavy, are you feeling all right? Can I bring you some water?" He turns, looks at her with clouded eyes. Oh, fine, dear, just fine. Mr. Whitmore is a good man. Helped me with important papers. Says my boy doesn't need this house. Navy's providing housing when he gets back. My place here is sitting empty, wasting. Better for the war effort, housing for defense workers. Vera nods, pours him water from the pitcher, sets the glass on his nightstand. Leaves. Thinks. Harold Dunleavy signed a will. For the war effort. But Whitmore said, "I'll take possession." How does a nursing home director take possession of property willed to the war effort? Vera isn't a lawyer, doesn't understand these technicalities, but something's wrong here. Friday, February 7th, Harold Dunleavy dies. Night shift, 3 in the morning. Vera makes her rounds, checks room 14, and finds him motionless. Approaches, feels for a pulse. Nothing. Skin still warm. She calls Dr. Creighton. He arrives within 40 minutes, lives nearby in Shadyside. Examines the body. Heart again. 76 years old, coronary disease, angina. Expected outcome. Creighton completes the paperwork, departs. Vera remains. Looks at the corpse. Harold Dunleavy lies peacefully, almost serene. hands at his sides, face relaxed, no signs of struggle, as if he fell asleep and didn't wake. But Vera thinks, 2 deaths in less than 2 weeks, both after signing papers with Whitmore, both sudden, both hearts, both expected given their ages. But both were stable just days earlier. She begins reviewing other deaths, requests access to archived files from the past year, tells Hastings she's studying patterns for a nursing journal article, wants to understand terminal care protocols. Hastings, unsuspecting, grants permission. Vera spends her lunch breaks in the records room, discovers that in 1942, 14 residents died at Oakmont. Pittsburgh's other comparable facilities average 7 to 9 deaths annually. Oakmont's death rate is nearly double. She cross-references names with property records at the Allegheny County Courthouse during her day off. Public information, anyone can access it. Of the 14 who died in 1942, 9 owned property. She traces deeds forward. In 6 cases, properties transferred to Whitmore within 6 months of death. Not to the state, not to charities, to Clarence J. Whitmore personally. Legal transfers through wills, all properly notarized, all witnessed by Oakmont staff members. Completely legal. Except the residents are dying. Vera writes names in a small notebook. Sarah Kellerman, died March 1942. Property on 5th Avenue transferred to Whitmore in July. Martin Holcomb, died May 1942. Property on Liberty Avenue transferred to Whitmore in September. Ruth Bannister, died July 1942. Property on Penn Avenue transferred to Whitmore in November. The pattern is clear. But proving murder is different from noticing patterns. She begins watching Dr. Creighton. Burton Creighton, respected physician, member of the Allegheny County Medical Society, 34 years in practice. Always professional, always proper, always available. Signs every death certificate without hesitation. Underscore underscore quote underscore 11 underscore 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 quote underscore 12 underscore underscore quote underscore 13 underscore underscore. All plausible for elderly patients. All impossible to definitively disprove without autopsy. And families rarely request autopsies for old people who die in nursing homes. Expected deaths. Natural deaths. Vera learns more about Creighton from the other nurses. He's been at Oakmont since 1922, longer than anyone else on staff. Widower, lives alone, no children. Drives a new Packard despite wartime restrictions on civilian car production. Owns a vacation cottage on Lake Erie. The nurses whisper that he's well off, saves his money, invests wisely. But his salary as a nursing home physician shouldn't afford such luxuries. Vera wonders. She also notices patterns in the medication logs. Creighton has unusual access to the narcotics cabinet, signs out medications at odd hours, sometimes on his days off. The quantities don't always match the administration records. Small discrepancies easily explained as clerical errors. But they accumulate. Vera starts her own log, documenting every inconsistency. February 10th. Creighton signs out 30 milligrams of morphine for patient in room 9. But that patient's chart shows only 20 milligrams administered. 10 milligrams unaccounted for. February 12th. Similar discrepancy with patient in room 15. February 15th. Another in room 23. She also observes Whitmore's interactions with families. When residents die, Whitmore is always gracious, sympathetic, helpful, offers to handle funeral arrangements, recommends undertakers, assists with paperwork. And he always mentions the property. Casual comments. Underscore underscore quote underscore 14 underscore underscore. Or underscore underscore quote underscore 15 underscore underscore. Planting seeds. Making himself indispensable. Building trust even as he plans theft. Vera considers going to the police. But with what? Suspicions? Overheard conversations? Property transfers that are technically legal? She'd sound paranoid. A young nurse accusing a respected businessman and doctor of serial murder based on hunches. They dismiss her, maybe fire her, possibly commit her to Mayview State Hospital for psychiatric observation. She needs proof. On February 19th, Friday afternoon, Whitmore visits Dr. Agnes Renwick in room 21. Stays 30 minutes. Vera watches from the hallway. When Whitmore leaves, she enters. Dr. Renwick sits in her chair by the window, holding papers, looking troubled. Vera asks gently, quote 16. The old surgeon looks up, studies Vera's face for a long moment, then says quietly, Nurse Holloway, you seem like an intelligent young woman. Tell me, does it strike you as strange that Mr. Whitmore takes such personal interest in our legal affairs? Vera's breath catches. Careful. Quote 18. Quote, Dr. Renwick gestures at the papers. Quote 19. Quote, she pauses. Quote 20. Quote, Vera makes a decision, crosses the room, sits down, speaks quietly. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 21, underscore, underscore. The old woman's eyes sharpen. You suspect something. I can't prove anything, but I'm worried. Doctor, Renwick folds the papers, places them in her nightstand drawer. My instincts served me well in surgery, Nurse Holloway. They're telling me to trust yours. I'll delay. 3 days later, Monday, February 22nd, Washington's birthday, a holiday, reduced staff. Vera works the evening shift. At 9 p.m., she sees Dr. Creighton arrive unexpectedly. He never works evenings. She watches him go directly to the medication room, unlock the narcotics cabinet with his key, remove a vial, returns it 20 minutes later. Vera waits until he leaves, then checks the narcotics log. The entry shows an unusually high dosage administered to Dr. Renwick for acute pain management, a dosage that makes no sense for an elderly woman with no history of severe pain, no recent complaints. Vera's nursing training kicks in. This isn't pain management. This is something far more dangerous. She runs to room 21. Dr. Renwick is in bed, breathing slowly, deeply unconscious. Vera checks her pulse, dangerously low and dropping. Respiratory rate, critically depressed. Medical emergency. Vera knows the treatment. Keep airways clear, stimulate breathing, get her to a hospital immediately. She runs to the phone, dials the operator, asks for Allegheny General Hospital, requests an ambulance. The operator connects her. She explains, elderly patient, medical emergency, needs immediate transport. The ambulance arrives 18 minutes later. Paramedics administer oxygen, load Dr. Renwick onto a stretcher, race away. Vera follows in a taxi, using her own money. At the hospital, doctors work for 2 hours, manage to stabilize Renwick, reverse the crisis, save her life. She regains consciousness near midnight, confused but alive. Vera sits beside the hospital bed. When Renwick's eyes focus, Vera says quietly, Dr. Renwick, you were given medication tonight by Dr. Creighton. Did you request pain medication? Renwick's face hardens with understanding. Vera nods. Vera goes directly to the Pittsburgh Police Department's East Liberty Station. It's 1 in the morning. The desk sergeant looks skeptical. A young woman in a nurse's uniform claiming a respected doctor tried to harm an elderly patient. But Vera is calm, precise, presents facts. The medication log entry, the hospital records showing the emergency, Dr. Renwick's statement, the pattern of deaths, the property transfers. The sergeant calls his captain. The captain arrives, listens, asks questions. Vera produces her notebook with names and dates. The captain picks up the phone, calls the district attorney's night duty prosecutor. By 3 a.m., an assistant DA named Vincent Cardoza arrives. A sharp young attorney, ambitious, smart. He interviews Vera for 2 hours, takes detailed notes, sees what she sees. A pattern that demands investigation. He makes a decision. We need to move fast. If Whitmore learns Renwick survived, he might destroy evidence. At 6 a.m., Tuesday, February 23rd, police detectives and DA investigators raid Oakmont Estate. Serve search warrants, seize records, question staff. Find Whitmore's office files, copies of wills, property deeds, correspondence with attorneys, notary records. Find Dr. Creighton's medical files, death certificates, medication logs, patient charts. Find something else, Whitmore's personal ledger, hidden in a locked drawer. It's a handwritten accounting book. One column lists names, all deceased Oakmont residents. Another column lists properties with estimated values. A third column shows dates and transaction amounts, numbers matching property sale prices. The ledger spans 3 years, 32 names, 32 deaths. Estimated total value? $140,000, equivalent to over $1 million in pre-war currency, an enormous fortune. Whitmore and Creighton are arrested at their homes that morning. Both deny everything, but the evidence is overwhelming. The investigation expands rapidly. The DA's office exhumes bodies, those whose families grant permission. Medical examiners find evidence of foul play in multiple cases. Handwriting experts confirm the ledger is Whitmore's. Notaries who witnessed wills testify they were called to Oakmont, saw residents sign documents, assumed everything was legitimate. Oakmont staff members, frightened, cooperative, describe Whitmore's private meetings with residents, Creighton's unusual evening visits, whispered conversations. One nurse, Loretta Finch, admits she suspected something but was afraid to speak up, afraid of losing her job during wartime labor shortages. The investigation reveals the full scope of the scheme. Whitmore and Creighton had been operating since 1940. They targeted residents carefully. Elderly, isolated, property owners, no close family or only distant relatives. Whitmore would befriend them, gain their trust, discuss their legacies. He'd suggest leaving property to charitable causes, the facility's operating fund, war relief efforts, veterans organizations. All noble sounding. Then he'd present documents, already prepared by his attorney. The wills looked legitimate, properly formatted, witnessed by staff, notarized. But buried in the legal language were clauses directing that Whitmore, as executor, could sell the properties and distribute proceeds at his discretion for charitable purposes. In practice, this meant Whitmore sold the properties, pocketed the money, and made token donations, $50 or $100, to maintain the appearance of charity. The ledger documented everything: acquisition dates, sale prices, charitable contributions of 1% or less, net profits. 3 years of systematic theft disguised as elder care. Investigators also discover Whitmore's lifestyle. Despite a modest stated salary of $3,000 annually, he owns a large house in Shadyside, membership in the exclusive Duquesne Club, a new Cadillac, investments in war bonds worth over $50,000. His tax returns show no inheritance, no family wealth, no legitimate income source beyond his salary. The money came from murdered residents. Dr. Creighton's finances reveal similar patterns. His bank statements show regular deposits that don't match his physician's salary. He owns the Lake Erie cottage outright, the Packard, stocks, and bonds. He also maintained a safe deposit box containing $12,000 in cash, more than 4 years of his stated income. Under interrogation, Creighton breaks first. His attorney negotiates. Testimony against Whitmore in exchange for life imprisonment instead of death. Creighton confesses to administering lethal doses to 11 residents over 3 years, always making it appear natural, always at Whitmore's instruction. Describes the method: late-night visits when Vera or other nurses were occupied, quick injections, altered charts. Says Whitmore paid him $500 per death, a fortune during Depression and wartime. Says he felt terrible but needed the money, rationalized that the residents were old and dying anyway, convinced himself it was mercy. The prosecution finds this confession convenient but doesn't rely on it exclusively. They have the ledger, the exhumations, the medical evidence, the financial records, Dr. Renwick's testimony. They build a case that doesn't require Creighton's cooperation, then use his confession to corroborate. The trial begins in August 1943. The prosecution calls 47 witnesses: Vera Holloway, Dr. Agnes Renwick, medical examiners, handwriting experts, property attorneys, surviving family members. Presents the ledger as Exhibit A, the death book, prosecutors call it. Shows the jury photographs of frail, elderly victims, reads their wills aloud, traces the money flow from their estates to Whitmore's bank accounts. Defense attorneys argue coincidence. Yes, Whitmore received bequests, but that's because grateful residents wanted to thank the facility. Yes, people died, but they were old and sick. Yes, Creighton administered medications, but for legitimate medical purposes. The trial lasts 6 weeks. The courtroom is packed daily, standing room only, journalists from across Pennsylvania, newsreel cameras outside. Vera testifies for 2 full days. The prosecution walks her through every detail, overhearing the conversation, checking the property records, documenting the medication discrepancies, saving Dr. Renwick. Defense attorneys try to shake her credibility. They suggest she's young, inexperienced, prone to dramatic interpretations. They note she's only been a nurse for 6 weeks when she made these accusations. They imply she's seeking attention, perhaps even fabricating evidence to advance her career. Vera remains calm, answers every question directly, produces her notebook, explains her reasoning. The jury watches her closely. A young woman, plainly dressed, no makeup, speaking quietly but firmly about watching people die and refusing to accept it as normal. Dr. Agnes Renwick testifies next. At 79, still sharp, she describes the incident in clinical detail. The pressure to sign papers, the unexpected visit from Creighton, the injection, waking in the hospital. She looks directly at Whitmore as she speaks. That man tried to kill me from my house. He smiled at me for months, brought me tea, pretended to care. And all along, he was planning my murder. I've spent 40 years as a surgeon, Mr. Whitmore. I've seen evil. But I've never seen evil dressed so respectably as you. The courtroom goes silent. Whitmore stares at the table, expressionless. His attorney objects. The statement is inflammatory. The judge overrules. It's the victim's testimony. It stands. The medical examiners testify about the exhumations. Describe finding evidence in remains that should have been clean. Explain how certain substances leave traces even in decomposed tissue. Use scientific language that makes the jury uncomfortable but convinced. Family members testify, sons and daughters of the dead, some who hadn't visited in years, now weeping with guilt and rage. They describe receiving letters from Whitmore after the deaths, helpful, kind, offering to assist with estates. They describe signing papers they didn't fully understand, trusting him because he'd cared for their parents. They describe learning years later that properties worth thousands had been sold for fractions of value, with proceeds disappearing. One daughter testifies about her mother, Sarah Kellerman, who owned a building on Fifth Avenue, worth approximately $15,000 in 1942. Whitmore sold it for $18,000, reported to the daughter that it sold for $9,000, gave her $3,000, kept $15,000. The daughter believed him, grateful to receive anything. Only discovered the truth when investigators showed her the actual sale records. She breaks down on the stand. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore. 34, underscore, underscore. Whitmore's defense team attempts damage control. They call character witnesses. Businessmen who belong to Whitmore's club. Church members who've known him for years. Neighbors who describe him as generous and kind. They argue the ledger is merely an accounting of legitimate bequests, that Whitmore was following the residents' wishes, that any irregularities in estate sales were honest mistakes. They claim Dr. Renwick's near death was a medical emergency properly treated, not attempted murder. They suggest Vera Holloway is a confused young woman who misinterpreted normal end-of-life care. The prosecution destroys these arguments methodically, cross-examines the character witnesses. Did you know Mr. Whitmore owned 11 properties acquired from dead residents? No, they didn't. Quote, 36 __. No, they didn't. Did you know he paid Dr. Creighton $500 per death? No, they didn't. The character witnesses leave the stand looking shaken, their testimonies worthless. The prosecution's closing argument is delivered by Assistant DA Vincent Cardoza, who's built his entire case around one theme: betrayal of trust. He speaks for 2 hours, pacing before the jury, his voice rising and falling with calculated emotion. Quote, 38. He points at Whitmore. Quote, 39. The defense's closing is weaker. Whitmore's attorney argues reasonable doubt, suggests the evidence is circumstantial, claims the prosecution hasn't proven intent beyond speculation, but he's fighting a ledger full of death and money, and he knows it. The jury deliberates for 4 days, returns guilty verdicts on 11 counts of first-degree murder for Whitmore, 9 counts for Creighton as accomplice. The judge sentences Whitmore to death, Creighton to life imprisonment. Whitmore's attorneys appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The conviction is upheld in 1945. Clarence Whitmore is executed at Rockview Penitentiary in January 1946. Dr. Burton Creighton dies in prison in 1953, heart attack, age 69. Oakmont Estate is closed permanently, sold at auction, eventually demolished. The property becomes a small park. Vera Holloway's life changes completely. During the trial, newspapers call her, quote, 40, quote, 41. She's uncomfortable with the attention, insists she just did what anyone would do. But she's offered a position at the Pennsylvania Department of Welfare, Elderly Services Division. Accepts. Spends the next 3 years developing new protocols, mandatory external reviews of nursing home deaths, independent verification of wills made by institutionalized elderly, surprise inspections by state investigators, requirements that families be notified within 24 hours of any death. Pennsylvania becomes the first state in the nation with comprehensive nursing home oversight. The work consumes her. She marries in 1947, Thomas Garrett, a Pittsburgh attorney she met during the Oakmont investigation, one of the junior prosecutors on Cardoza's team. They have 2 children, Ruth in 1949, Michael in 1951. The marriage is happy but strained by Vera's dedication. She travels constantly for work, misses school events, brings case files home, wakes from nightmares about elderly victims she couldn't save. Thomas is supportive but worried, tells her in 1956, "You're burning yourself out. You've done enough. Let someone else carry this." Vera responds, "If I stop, people die. I can't stop." They stay married through compromise. Thomas handles most parenting duties. Vera limits travel to 3 days per week. They maintain family dinners when she's home. It works, barely. The children grow up understanding their mother does important work, but wishing she was home more often. Ruth remembers her childhood. __quote _ 44 __. Michael, her son, chose a different path, became an accountant, deliberately picked a stable profession with regular hours, didn't want his children to experience what he experienced. But he's proud of his mother, tells his kids about her, keeps newspaper clippings of her achievements, says in a 2010 interview, __quote _ 45 __. Vera herself wrestles with these choices. In a 1985 interview, asked about work-life balance, she's candid. "I don't have balance. I have priorities. My priority is protecting people who can't protect themselves. My family paid a price for that. I paid a price for that. I missed things I can never get back. My children's childhoods, time with my husband, normalcy. Would I make the same choices again? Probably. Are they the only right choices? No. Others can balance differently. But for me, knowing what I know, having seen what I've seen, I can't not do this work. The day I stop fighting is the day I betray those 11 people who died at Oakmont. Thomas dies in 1982, heart attack, age 61. Vera is devastated. They've been married 35 years. She delivers the eulogy. Quote, "After his death, she throws herself even deeper into work. Ruth intervenes in 1984. Quote, Vera responds. Quote, in 1946, Vera testifies before a U.S. Senate subcommittee investigating elder care. Her testimony influences the first federal nursing home regulations. She meets Senator Claude Pepper of Florida, who becomes a champion for elderly rights. They correspond for years, collaborate on legislation. By 1950, Vera is deputy director of the Pennsylvania Bureau of Aging Services, implements training programs for nursing home staff, establishes ombudsman systems for resident complaints, creates an investigative unit that probes suspicious deaths. Under her leadership, Pennsylvania closes 14 abusive facilities, prosecutes 32 cases of elder abuse and fraud. In 1955, she publishes a book, quote, _50__. It becomes required reading in nursing schools across the country, cited in congressional hearings, influences state laws nationwide. 1960. Vera, age 41, founds the National Coalition for Elder Protection, a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. The organization monitors nursing homes, advocates for stronger regulations, assists families navigating the system, provides legal support for abuse victims. Staff of 12, budget of $30,000 annually, funded by foundation grants and individual donors. The work is difficult. Many nursing homes resent oversight, claim it's government overreach, accuse Vera of unfairly maligning an entire industry based on one bad case. Some facilities bar her investigators from entering. Others threaten lawsuits. Vera faces these challenges methodically, documents everything, builds relationships with sympathetic legislators, cultivates media contacts who cover elder abuse stories. In 1961, the coalition's investigators uncover fraud at a facility in Baltimore. The director had been pocketing Social Security checks of residents with dementia, claiming the money was for quote, _51__, while providing minimal food and no medical attention. Vera's team gathers evidence, presents it to Maryland authorities, achieves prosecution. The director receives 5 years in prison. In 1962, a case in Detroit, a nursing home administrator physically abusing residents, hitting them with a cane when they failed to follow instructions quickly enough. Vera's investigators interview staff, collect testimony from lucid residents, photograph bruises. The administrator is fired and criminally charged. In 1963, Chicago, a facility housing 30 elderly patients in a building zoned for 15, charging families premium rates while providing substandard care, no heat in winter, spoiled food. Vera's coalition alerts city inspectors, who shut down the facility and relocate residents. Each case builds the coalition's reputation. Slowly, grudgingly, the industry begins to accept that oversight is inevitable. Some facilities even welcome it, seeing accreditation from Vera's organization as a mark of quality. 1965. Medicare and Medicaid pass. Vera's organization plays a crucial role in shaping the legislation's nursing home provisions, mandatory inspections, quality standards, resident rights protections. She testifies before Congress 3 times that year. President Lyndon Johnson invites her to the White House for the bill signing, personally thanks her. 1970. The organization expands to offices in 10 states, staff of 45. Vera is executive director, known nationally as an expert on aging policy. She trains investigators, speaks at conferences, writes articles for medical journals, appears on CBS News, NBC's Today Show, testifies before state legislatures. Her work attracts both praise and criticism. Industry lobbyists accuse her of exaggerating problems, damaging reputations, imposing costly regulations that hurt small facilities. Vera responds with data, documents showing abuse rates, mortality statistics, financial audits revealing fraud. She appears on 60 Minutes in 1972, interviewed by Mike Wallace. He asks tough questions. Quote 52 __. Vera answers calmly. Quote 53 __. The interview airs nationally, generates thousands of letters to Congress. Legislators who'd been ambivalent about nursing home reform suddenly receive constituent pressure. Bills that had stalled begin moving forward. In 1973, Vera testifies before the Senate Special Committee on Aging, chaired by Senator Frank Church of Idaho. She presents a comprehensive report. 30 years of data since Oakmont, showing patterns of abuse, financial exploitation, medical neglect, and outright violence in facilities across America. Recommends federal standards, mandatory inspections, criminal penalties for abuse. The hearing lasts 3 days, covered extensively by newspapers. Senator Church becomes an ally, champions reform legislation. In 1974, Vera's coalition releases a groundbreaking study. Quote 54 __. The report analyzes how nursing home business models create perverse incentives. Facilities profit more from taking residents' money while minimizing care costs, creating pressure to cut corners, neglect needs, sometimes hasten deaths of expensive patients. The report is controversial but meticulously researched, cited by academics, used as evidence in congressional debates. 1975. Congress passes the Nursing Home Reform Act, heavily influenced by Vera's advocacy. The law establishes resident bills of rights, mandates quality standards, creates enforcement mechanisms. Vera is in the Senate gallery when the vote is taken, weeps quietly. 32 years since Oakmont. 32 years of fighting. 1980. Vera, age 61, receives the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Jimmy Carter. The citation reads, quote 55. She stands on the White House stage, accepts the medal, thinks about Mrs. Edith Morrow, Harold Dunleavy, the 11 who died. Wishes they could have lived to see this moment. 1986. Vera retires as executive director, becomes board chair emeritus. The organization now operates in all 50 states, staff of 200, annual budget of $3 million. Investigates hundreds of complaints yearly, achieves prosecution in dozens of cases, saves lives she'll never know about. Vera is 67, still sharp, still active, still angry about injustice. She mentors young advocates, teaches seminars, gives interviews, tells them, "One person can stop evil. I was 24 years old, a new nurse, nobody important. But I paid attention. I trusted my instincts. I gathered evidence. I refused to be intimidated. You can do the same." In retirement, Vera focuses on training the next generation. She develops a curriculum used in nursing schools nationwide, recognizing and reporting elder abuse. Teaches students how to spot warning signs, document evidence, navigate reporting systems, protect themselves from retaliation. Thousands of nursing students learn from her materials each year. She also writes extensively. In 1988, she publishes an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. The Oakmont Legacy, 3 decades of elder protection reform, traces how the Oakmont case changed medical practice, legal standards, regulatory frameworks. Becomes one of the most cited articles in geriatric care literature. In 1990, she's invited to speak at the American Medical Association's annual convention. Gives a keynote address to 5,000 physicians. Your duty to protect. Challenges doctors to see elderly patients not as revenue sources or burdens, but as people deserving dignity and fierce advocacy. Receives a standing ovation. Personal letters arrive constantly, from families. "You saved my mother. Your investigator found she was being over-medicated to keep her quiet. We moved her to a better facility and she lived 5 more good years." From former residents. "I was in a terrible place, afraid to complain. Your hotline gave me a voice. I'm safe now, thank you. From Young Advocates. I read your book in college. It's why I do this work. You inspired me. Vera keeps every letter in file boxes in her basement, hundreds of them, thousands over the years. When doubt creeps in, when a case is lost, when a guilty facility escapes punishment, when the work feels impossible, she reads these letters and remembers why it matters. 1993. Vera returns to Pittsburgh for the 50th anniversary of the Oakmont trial. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette runs a front-page feature. She visits the park where Oakmont once stood. Playground equipment, walking paths, a bench donated by families of victims with a plaque. In memory of those lost. In gratitude to those who spoke. Vera, now 74, sits on the bench, remembers. A reporter asks if she regrets anything. She thinks carefully, then answers, I regret I didn't realize sooner. Mrs. Morrow might have lived. But I was young, inexperienced. I learned. The important thing is, once I knew, I acted. That's what matters. Not perfection, but action. The anniversary brings unexpected reunions. Dr. Agnes Renwick is still alive at 99, living with her daughter in Chicago. Too frail to travel, she sends a video message played at the memorial service. Vera Holloway saved my life in 1943. But more than that, she saved countless others by refusing to let evil hide behind respectability. She's a true American hero. I only wish I could have done more to help her. Vincent Cardoza, the prosecutor, now 73 and retired, attends the ceremony. He and Vera embrace, old warriors meeting on an old battlefield. He tells her, that case made my career, but you made that case. Everything we accomplished came from your courage in that first moment, deciding to pay attention when something felt wrong. Families of the 11 victims attend. Some are children of the victims, now elderly themselves. Others are grandchildren who never met their ancestors but know the story. They thank Vera, shake her hand, cry. One woman, granddaughter of Harold Dunleavy, says, my father lived his whole life wondering if he could have saved his dad. He didn't know about the will, didn't know about Whitmore's scheme. He felt guilty until the day he died. But it wasn't his fault. It was murder. You proved that. You gave our family the truth. The memorial service includes readings from Vera's book, testimony excerpts from the trial, newspaper headlines from 1943. A local high school choir sings. The mayor of Pittsburgh gives a speech praising Vera's lifetime of service. Vera sits in the front row, listening, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its importance. After the ceremony, she walks through the park alone, stands where the front entrance of Oakmont once stood, closes her eyes, remembers climbing those steps on January 12, 1943, young and nervous and hopeful. Remembers the smell of disinfectant and cabbage. Remembers Mrs. Morrow's gray eyes, Mr. Dunleavy's trembling hands, Dr. Renwick's surgeon's composure. Remembers the fear when she realized what was happening. The cold night run to the police station, the trial, Whitmore's expressionless face, the jury's verdict. 50 years, half a century, a lifetime spent fighting the same fight in different forms. Was it worth it? She thinks of the letters in her basement, the thousands of voices saying, you saved my mother, you saved my father, you saved me. Yes, it was worth it. 2000. Vera, age 81, is diagnosed with lung cancer. Never smoked, but worked in hospitals with asbestos insulation for decades. Doctors give her 6 months. She lives 18, stubborn to the end. Spends the time writing a second book. Lessons from Oakmont, a manual for protecting vulnerable populations. Detailed guide on recognizing abuse, documenting evidence, navigating bureaucracy, protecting yourself while fighting institutions. The writing process is difficult. Chemotherapy leaves her exhausted, but she works every day she can manage. Her daughter Ruth helps, typing dictation when Vera's hands shake too much to write, researching statistics, organizing chapters. Vera wants the book to be practical, not theoretical. She includes specific checklists, warning signs of abuse, steps for documentation, contact information for reporting agencies, scripts for difficult conversations. She includes case studies from her 40 years of work, anonymized but detailed. Shows how abuse manifests in different forms: financial exploitation, medical neglect, physical violence, emotional manipulation, sexual assault. Shows how to recognize each type, how to gather evidence, how to protect victims while building cases. She includes a chapter on self-protection, how to document your own work, how to avoid retaliation, what to do if you're fired or threatened, how to find legal support. Draws from her own experience and the experiences of hundreds of advocates she's trained. Another chapter on institutional resistance, how facilities hide abuse, how administrators manipulate investigations, how to counter common defense tactics, anticipates every obstacle, provides strategies to overcome them. The book also includes personal reflections. Vera writes about fear, how it feels to confront powerful people, to risk your career and safety, to stand alone against institutions. She's honest. I was terrified. Every day from February 1943 until the trial ended in August, I was afraid. Afraid Whitmore would kill me, afraid the police wouldn't believe me, afraid I'd made terrible mistakes. Fear is normal. Fear is human. But fear cannot be an excuse for inaction. She writes about doubt. I've made mistakes. I've pursued cases that didn't pan out. I've trusted people who betrayed that trust. I've failed to save people I should have saved. This work is imperfect because people are imperfect. But imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. She writes about hope. The world has changed since 1943. Elderly Americans have rights now, protections, advocates. Nursing homes are regulated, inspected, accountable. Abuse still happens, but it's no longer invisible. We've built systems that work. Imperfectly, inadequately, but they work. And they work because people refuse to accept that vulnerable populations must suffer. That's the lesson of Oakmont. One person's refusal to accept evil can change everything. The book is published in March 2001, 3 weeks before Vera dies. She insists on doing one book tour event, a talk at the University of Pittsburgh School of Nursing, her alma mater. She's frail, weighing 90 pounds, needing a wheelchair, but her mind is sharp and her voice is steady. Speaks to an auditorium of nursing students. She receives a standing ovation. Dies 3 weeks later, on March 7, 2002, age 83. The same age Mrs. Morrow was when Whitmore killed her. Obituaries run in every major newspaper. The New York Times headline, __quote _76__. Hundreds attend her funeral. Senators, advocates, nursing home residents, family members of victims saved by the regulations she fought for. Today, in 2026, the National Coalition for Elder Protection, renamed the Vera Holloway Foundation in 2005, operates in all 50 states and 3 territories. Staff of 350, annual budget of $18 million, investigates thousands of complaints yearly, achieves hundreds of prosecutions, influences policy at federal and state levels. Training programs educate 50,000 caregivers annually. Hotlines receive 100,000 calls yearly. Legal assistance programs serve 15,000 families. The organization estimates it has directly prevented over 10,000 cases of elder abuse since Vera founded it 66 years ago. The foundation's work continues evolving. In the 2000s, they identify new abuse patterns: identity theft targeting dementia patients, financial exploitation through power of attorney, pharmaceutical overmedication for staff convenience, isolation abuse through restricted family visits. Each new pattern gets documented, studied, addressed through advocacy and legislation. The foundation maintains the Oakmont database, named in honor of the original case, a comprehensive national registry of nursing home violations, inspection reports, complaint histories, ownership information. Public access, searchable by facility name or location. Families use it to research facilities before placing loved ones. Journalists use it to investigate abuse trends. Prosecutors use it to establish patterns in criminal cases. The database has become the gold standard for nursing home transparency. State chapters operate with significant autonomy but shared standards. California's chapter focuses on migrant farm worker elder care, a population often overlooked by mainstream services. Florida's chapter specializes in for-profit facility abuse, given the state's large elderly population and prevalence of investor-owned homes. New York's chapter runs an emergency response team that can deploy within hours to facilities where abuse is reported. Texas operates a legal clinic that has achieved over 300 prosecutions in the past decade. Personal stories accumulate. In 2015, an investigator in Ohio receives a call from a woman whose 86-year-old father, a Korean War veteran, is being held in a facility against his will, told he owes $15,000 for care services not covered by Medicare. The investigator visits, reviews the contract, identifies fraudulent billing, works with state regulators to investigate. The facility is fined, required to refund money to dozens of families, eventually shut down for systematic fraud. The veteran returns home. In 2018, a nurse in Arizona notices that residents in her facility are losing weight despite adequate food being prepared. Investigates, discovers kitchen staff are selling food meant for residents and serving them minimal portions. Reports to the Foundation's hotline. Foundation investigators coordinate with state health inspectors. Kitchen supervisor and 2 staff members are fired and criminally charged. New oversight protocols implemented. In 2020, during COVID-19, the Foundation identifies patterns of nursing homes refusing to allow family contact even for dying residents, claiming infection control, but actually hiding neglect and abuse. The Foundation advocates for visitation rights policies, achieves state-level reforms in 17 states allowing compassionate visits even during health emergencies, saves countless families from dying alone unnecessarily. In 2023, the Foundation's investigators uncover a multi-state scheme. A private equity firm buying nursing homes, cutting staff to maximize profits, allowing care quality to collapse while extracting maximum revenue. The investigation takes 2 years, involves coordination across 8 states, results in federal charges against executives, facility closures, and regulatory reforms on private equity ownership of elder care facilities. Stories like these happen constantly. Every week brings new cases, new victims saved, new perpetrators exposed. The Foundation's annual reports read like chronicles of trench warfare. Hundreds of small victories, occasional major triumphs, persistent grinding effort. But the work succeeds. Elder abuse rates, while still too high, have declined 40% since 1990, according to Department of Health and Human Services data. Nursing home regulation has transformed from nearly non-existent in 1943 to comprehensive federal and state oversight. Resident rights are now codified in law. Families have recourse. Advocates have infrastructure. The change is real and measurable. Laws she influenced protect 40 million elderly Americans. Her books are still taught in nursing schools, social work programs, law schools. Her testimony is cited in Supreme Court cases on elder rights. Young advocates who never met her carry forward her mission, driven by her example, her words, her absolute refusal to accept that vulnerable people must suffer because speaking up is difficult or dangerous. The Oakmont case remains the foundational example in elder abuse investigations, the template for recognizing patterns, gathering evidence, building cases that can't be dismissed or ignored. Prosecutors study Vera's testimony transcripts. Investigators use her methods. Advocates invoke her name when challenging powerful institutions. Nursing students learn her story in their first ethics class. Social workers cite her example when training on mandatory reporting. Medical examiners reference the Oakmont autopsies when investigating suspicious deaths of elderly patients. Policymakers quote her congressional testimony when debating regulations. Her influence extends beyond elder care. The Oakmont case established legal precedents about institutional responsibility, fiduciary duty, vulnerability-based sentencing enhancements. Courts cited in cases involving abuse of people with disabilities, children in foster care, psychiatric patients, prisoners. The principle Vera demonstrated, that institutional power creates obligation and violation of that trust merits severe punishment, has become fundamental to American law. The foundation she created has spawned imitators and allies. The National Adult Protective Services Association, founded in 1989, uses Vera's training methods. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, established in 1972 and expanded in 1978, implements her model of independent oversight. The Elder Justice Act of 2010 codifies many of her recommended policies. These organizations work together, coordinate investigations, share resources, amplify impact. International influence has also grown. In 2008, the United Nations issued a report on elder abuse prevention, citing the Oakmont case and recommending that nations implement Vera Holloway-style oversight systems. Countries including Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, and Japan have adapted elements of her model. In 2012, Vera posthumously received the UN Human Rights Prize, accepted by her daughter Ruth. The citation read, "For pioneering work establishing that elder protection is a human right, and demonstrating that individual courage can create systemic change." Every year on February 23rd, the anniversary of the Oakmont raid, the Foundation holds remembrance events nationwide. Candles for the 11 victims. Vera's words read aloud. __quote _79 __. These events serve multiple purposes. They honor the dead. They remind advocates why the work matters. They educate the public about ongoing abuse. They recruit new volunteers. They pressure legislators to maintain funding for protection programs. They keep the story alive. In 2024, the Foundation launched the Vera Holloway Fellowship Program. Each year, 24 young advocates, the same age Vera was when she started at Oakmont, receive 2-year grants to work on elder protection in underserved communities. Fellows get training, mentorship, resources, and the mandate to innovate. The first cohort includes a data scientist developing algorithms to detect financial abuse patterns, a documentary filmmaker creating educational content, a lawyer building a litigation fund for class action cases, a former nursing home administrator designing ethical facility management models. These fellows embody Vera's spirit, young, determined, refusing to accept that vulnerable people must suffer. The Foundation also maintains the Vera Holloway Archive at the University of Pittsburgh, containing her personal papers, notebooks from the Oakmont investigation, correspondence, photographs, recordings of speeches and interviews, drafts of her books. Researchers use the archive to study elder abuse history, advocacy strategy, policy development. Students visit to connect with the human story behind the statistics. The archive is open to the public, free admission, because Vera believed knowledge should be accessible to everyone, and they don't stay silent. Each year, tens of thousands of reports are filed, investigated, prosecuted. Abusive facilities are closed, criminals are convicted, regulations are strengthened, lives are saved. All because a 24-year-old nurse in Pittsburgh in 1943 overheard a conversation, trusted her instincts, gathered evidence, and refused to be intimidated by a respectable businessman who thought his position protected him. Because Vera Holloway understood a simple truth: institutions protect themselves, but individuals can choose to protect the vulnerable instead. Because she chose justice over safety, truth over silence, action over fear. And that choice, made in a moment of moral clarity on a cold February night 83 years ago, echoes forward through every life saved, every abuse prevented, every voice raised in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The legacy of Oakmont is not the 11 who died. The legacy is the tens of thousands who lived because one young woman decided that murder was unacceptable, regardless of the victim's age. that evil must be confronted regardless of the risk, that silence in the face of systematic killing was itself a crime she would not commit. Vera Holloway made that choice, and America's vulnerable elderly have been safer ever since.